Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to this Q&A on Bastards Road. Uh, I'm operating under the assumption that you all have watched the film. Fantastic documentary. I'm lucky enough to have with me Brian Morrison, the director, and John Hancock, the subject of the film. And I've watched it over and over again, partially to do this Q&A, but I truly love the film. So I would first just want to say thanks. Like, John, thanks for your service, but thanks for also doing this really important work around post-traumatic stress disorder. And Brian, thanks for having the vision to see that this is a story that needs to be told. Like that, this is really important kind of work. And so just thanks to both of you right off the bat for the work that you've done.
Thanks for having us, Thane.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here, and it's great that we get to see this film get spread to masses once again through any sort of virtual film festival. So it's really an honor to be a part of this again. So thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. Well, just to start off with, so Brian, as I was reading your director's statement, you guys went to high school together. Is this right? And you like saw a news story about John, and this was kind of the starting point for doing a documentary?
Yeah. John and I went to the same high school. We were only 1 year apart. It was a big school, so we had a few mutual friends, but we never kind of ran into each other. As John had begun his walk, he started popping up on these local news specials that were highlighting what he was doing. And it wasn't until maybe 1,000 miles into John's walk, I started seeing that through mutual friends of what this guy that I went to high school with was doing. And, I was super fascinated and interested in it, and come to find out my next door neighbor was John's closest friend growing up. And so I would talk with Dave and I would talk with my wife about John and what we knew and remembered about him, and what we knew, about his journey through what was being put out through these like local news articles and TV specials. And I don't know, I felt so moved by what he was doing that I had to reach out, and Dave Parks was able to put John and I in contact with each other. It was I called him when John was in Slidell, Louisiana, and we kind of started feeling out, if that made sense. And I mean, kind of the rest was history.
Yeah, well, that's great. It. Yeah. So John, what did it feel like to all of a sudden, I mean, you're doing this thing, you've been on the road for a while, and all of a sudden somebody says, I want to do a documentary about what you're doing.
I can remember as I started the walk, I was down near AP Hill, which is in Virginia, right off 301. And I had really come to a determining factor of, I think I want to quit. And I had a really hard struggle with that. And I called my mom, as you'll see in the film, or how you have seen in the film. Right. I called my mom, and it was a really tough time for me. And I think part of that was, with everything that was going on in the world at that time, I just wasn't seeing the support from the masses. I wasn't seeing. Now, I had no intention of making a documentary. I had no intention of trying to go viral or whatever that is, but I just thought that more people would be inclined to know or inclined to talk to me about things, and that wasn't happening. And when I did get down to Slidell, Louisiana, because I went all the way down to Miami and then traced the Gulf back into Texas. And, so I'm in Slidell, and I get this phone call, and Brian and I talked, and I hung up the phone, and I thought, if there's ever going to be a time where you get to tell the world what you're feeling, then this is probably the avenue that you want to explore. And I was very nervous about it because at the end of the day, you're putting your life on display. And I have no problem doing that. I just wanted to make sure that we did it the right way, and that we were honest with it. We didn't sugarcoat anything. And Brian really listened to me as we were going through this. And this is kind of a weird documentary because I'm so very heavily involved in it. And documentary subjects aren't involved in the editing process. They aren't involved in any of this. And for a lot of it, I was very involved in it because I wanted to make sure the story rang true. I wanted to make sure that it was as much about me as it was my brothers and what we're feeling. And Brian really took that on. And so I commend him for that because at the end of the day, it was a very nerve-wracking process for everybody involved. And to be able to be the creative mind behind it and see how he wants to display this, but also listening to me and allowing me to inject a lot of my thought and feeling into the process of this whole thing was, it's odd. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happened here. And we forged a great friendship and a huge amount of trust in a very short amount of time. And I think that was because, I think that was two things. I think one, I was a little lonely. I'm out there walking and I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
But two, and more importantly, was that I wanted to be able to give that to people, to give people the understanding of what a warfighter experiences when they come home. And while my story is just one story, a lot of the veteran community can resonate with that, and they align to it. They feel it. They see it. They don't see me in the film. They see themselves, and they see their own experiences. And I think that's really neat. So having that ability and making this documentary and being a part of it has been really a culmination of what I thought could happen with regards to how veterans should be speaking out.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, as I watched the film, it occurred to me that they're really like two journeys. You know, there is this very obvious like journey across the country, a kind of linear sort of thing. And then there's this sort of other journey like into your soul, John. I mean, into this kind of back and forth, upside down, inside out, very, very curvilinear kind of storyline. And I'm just curious, since you both had so much to do then with the end product, how did one journey like inform the other? How do you determine, okay, we're going to talk about actually walking, and now we're going to focus on really what John's going through?
Well, it was it's a process that, you know, evolves like any editing project on a significant scale or writing project. Mark Stafford was kind of like my butt buddy in the editing room and crafting and that narrative. And yeah, there was this kind of twofold dynamic between John on the road and the isolation that he was experiencing, and thus being challenged to think about things that he had done in his past and really going to war with yourself on the road. And that was the initial kind of draw that I kind of sensed was, you know, the isolation the road provides and walking alone day after day after day and being just alone with yourself and the things that you've done, and how courageous I thought that was for John to undertake that. It was, you know, for me being a very visual person, you know, I'm thinking of these beautiful landscapes, but also that pain that is there. But so yeah. And the other component was these reunions and these meetings that John was having along the way that, I mean, almost like the Odyssey is, you know, you have this long voyage home, and you're you know, having these visits that are kind of mean something different in each kind of stage. Each person that John visited with, I'm learning a different part of the story through somebody else. I'm kind of hearing similar stories and similar things from somebody else and getting in a different context, and which was so fascinating. But what the most striking thing was the loyalty that they had to each other and the trust they had to each other to let me in the door with a video camera. You know, we're talking about a very intimate reunions
Yeah.
for John and his brothers. And me being there, it was like there was so much anxiety that I'm ruining a moment and I'm spoiling something that is very pure. So it was something that, I, am forever grateful to kind of have a backseat to these moments. And I think it's a very big testament again to the loyalty that they have to each other and the strength and courage that they have to put themselves out there. So yeah, I was just totally floored by that.
Well, yeah, John, how did that ring for you with the people you served with and having a camera and talking about these really tough moments? I mean, like, yeah, that was so personal, which was, of course, I think the tremendous draw of the documentary. But yeah, what kind of negotiation, or how did you allow that to all happen?
Well, so Brian and I had decided that I had a VA appointment that I couldn't miss for the compensation and benefits portion of benefits and whatnot that I had to make. So I had to fly home in Texas. So I took a quick break. I flew back to Maryland. We met up, did a 2-hour interview in his basement on one of those days that I was home. Kind of said, okay, this feels good. This feels right. Let's do it. And then Brian came out to me in about 60 miles west of North Platte, Nebraska. And so we had met out there. We filmed for quite a few days. And I had called a buddy that I was coming to visit in North Platte. And I said, hey man, I got this guy. And I had been updating people on the road about, what I was doing. I had those little Facebook vignettes or whatever. And so I was just kind of updating people every day. And so a lot of the guys knew that Brian was now, our wagons were lashed together, and they knew that it was kind of a package deal. But I made sure to let everyone know, hey man, like if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do it. And there wasn't a single no ever.
Wow.
Everyone was excited to see me. There were a couple times where people were like, hey man, maybe don't do the camera right away. Maybe we talk first and then we'll, kind of get into it. And those were certain requests from some of the guys. But ultimately, when I would call some of these guys, I'd be like, hey man, I'm on the way and I'll be there in, 3 weeks or whatever it is. And Brian will probably fly out and he'll want to meet you. Is that okay? And, the only question I was ever asked was, is he on the level? And, or do you trust him? And I said, yeah, I do, implicitly. And they said, okay, man, if you trust him, then we're good. And there wasn't a lot of diminishment, if you will, from reunions because there's a camera there. At first it kind of feels odd, but by that point I had been so inundated with cameras from Brian and from some of these local news stations that it almost just disappeared for me, and I didn't even think it was there. And I think that allowed others subconsciously to also feel that way, because if I didn't, I'm like, oh yeah, this is Brian, whatever, go away. And Brian would just be there, a fly on the wall, if you will. And he was very respectful about how he did it. He worked alone. He didn't have a sound guy. He didn't have anything else. It was him working with everything. And so Brian would just kind of be a fly on the wall. And you would see after a few minutes that they forgot he was there as well, because, the most important thing is that we're back together. And we just really don't care who's around because we're going to talk like we talk anyway. And so it was neat to capture that. And I don't think there was a single guy that was very reticent after the first couple seconds of it. And so it was very organic the way it happened. It was very honorable, and Brian did it with a lot of grace. And I think that's part of the reason that they allowed him into that room. The trust from me to him transcended, and it just kind of flowed.
Well, Brian, if I read your statement right, this is your first feature documentary. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you got your first feature documentary. You're in these incredibly emotional conversations, and it is just you. And even though the trust has been established, I mean, I still would wonder how that felt for you, capturing the event and being a fly on the wall and still like needing to get a job done to get those kinds of interviews on film?
Well, it was a mix of things. It was just a wave of different emotions. I mean, it was heartbreaking, but also inspirational. And I felt really honored to be an ear and listen. And at the beginning, there was a little anxiety about, going to some very personal places and not knowing really how to go from there. But it became almost comforting that I don't really need to say anything. I just need to be an ear. And that's what a lot of us need, whether, we have, trauma from war, or we are dealing with the death of a loved one. I mean, we all just need just an ear sometimes. And so there became kind of a comfort and peace. And John really helped me with that. And as our relationship kind of grew, those talks and the time spent with his brothers became easier, became more familiar as I got with what they were going through. So, you know, the guys that serve together in these units, particularly like with John's battalion, I mean, there is a level of familiarity, of trust, of the things that they've done, that it's like a base, like a context line, where like if they're in a room together, there's a comfort level. We don't need to go to these certain places because we all understand one another. And I think as the more that I learned, it felt me, it was easier for me to communicate better with them. And I think that probably that they felt that a little bit, but that all came from just the building of these relationships, and John and I's being that strongest kind of tree that each one of them kind of branched out from. And there were some times where I missed a sound guy, or I missed like a camera assistant in some ways, because we're going into some heavy moments that I would just be heartbroken if something happened to my camera, or that we were going to some really the heartfelt moments where if they're going to go there with me with the camera on and have something technical, mess it up, it would just really be heartbreaking. And again, but so some of that was on faith, is that, hey, I'm going to set this stuff up. I'm going to do my best to, prepare the camera angle to get the sound right. And then I'm just going to talk, and I'm going to forget about this stuff. But like after the fact, there's anxiety on a technical side of like, hey, I hope we got everything. But, first and foremost, it was just that relationship and those conversations that were key, and everything else was kind of secondary.
And I think also the really neat thing that really allowed Brian into the room a lot was that Brian really took on the understanding of the Marine Corps, and he did a lot of research and asked so many questions of me. I don't think there are, between Brian and Mark, I don't think there are two more well-versed civilians inside order of battle for a military unit. They understand delineation between platoons and companies and fire teams. They understand so much on a level that made those guys comfortable, because they didn't have to sit there and educate. They didn't have to sit there and explain, okay, well, this is a platoon and I was here and Hancock was over here. They didn't have to do any of that. And so it became seamless, because Brian really put in a lot of work and really started to understand this, so that when Brian would come in and ask certain questions, I can remember there are quite a few different times where after interviews, the guys would come out and talk to me, and they're like, dude, that guy knows a lot about the Marine Corps. And I'm like, yeah, he's learned. And I think that really gave a good segue into a lot of those meetings, because they didn't have to sit there and educate. They didn't have to sit there and go back to the elementary school stuff of what we all know. And so it was very seamless. And so I think that was another huge part of being able to listen and feeling comfortable talking, because Brian already knew so much. And, that was me and him talking, and, line and block charts, and this is what this looks like. And, here's this. And we spent hours doing that. And then Brian kind of memorized it, committed it to memory, and now it's part of him.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, Yeah, so the interviews, like I'm assuming, Brian, that you did with John, like there were different segments. There's one that's like on a beach somewhere, and I think like John watches the footage you had shot with Kristen, right? And you, I mean, that is a compelling interview there, and I guess I'm curious, like how far into the process that took place, like how long did you guys have to work together to get to a point to have that kind of really honest discussion?
Well,
I
the
was
honest
towards the end.
discussions,
Right.
yeah, that beach shot, that's at Zuma Beach. That's, I mean, hell, that's 12 days before I finished the walk.
Okay.
But the honesty came very quickly. The honesty came in our conversation in Slidell, Louisiana. And Brian had relayed some of his family trauma and things that he was going through or had experienced through family members and addiction, and some of the stuff that kind of really resonated with me, and we kind of aligned. But the honesty, the trust, that came very quickly, and that was moment one. And so by the end of this thing, we're hot and heavy into it, and there's no stone unturned at this point. There's nothing off limits, and I think that comes through very quickly in the film.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian, did you just in terms of conducting that interview there on the beach, like did that feel like the conversation that needed to happen at that moment to get to sort of the next level, or?
Yeah, that was towards the end of John's journey, and I hadn't really dug into to his relationship with Kristen at that point, and so I won't say it was strategic as much as it's just a relationship that evolves naturally, and that as we learn more about each other, yeah, like John said, like certain stones haven't been unturned yet, and so you just as you move along that journey, and yeah, and as John was approaching the end, yeah, there was probably more of a desire to finish things out. And obviously, like John's the mental state of being close to finishing something that you'd been doing for a year and a half of your life every day. I mean, there were a lot of emotions then. I remember John and I speaking, I think after the 2 days or 3 days into that last trip, that I came out, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's still a week left about to go. And it just, I was emotionally spent, a week before it was finished. And, John, and I remember there was one of the last days before the walk, and I was videotaping John from like, I don't know, like 300, 400 feet away with a zoom lens. And I saw the look on his face, and then I'm just like, John is so tired and he's struggling. And it kind of resonated with me as like, it's, and this has been a journey, and this has been a sacrifice of the body and the mind that, I think it's still, I mean, I hope the documentary does some justice to that, but I don't think it ever will. But yeah, some of these, that just really struck a chord with me, is like of how difficult it was. I mean, you would think like you walk in a certain way with a certain pack, and that your body would kind of adapt along the way. I mean, John was having blisters on his feet like almost 4,000 miles into his journey. I mean, it was pain. And there's only a very certain motivation and inspiration that can kind of carry you through that type of thing over and over, day after day.
Well, yeah. So an interesting message that I think comes out, like this connection with the PTSD, is really like I'm curious about your stance on the suicides, because it felt like that was a different take, about how that really transfers the pain to someone else,
Yeah.
and and that feels like an important message that comes out from the film. but probably a different message than some other films might have around stress and suicide and things like that.
Sure. And my stance on suicide is sometimes it can be very blunt, and I have absolutely in certain cases been so very angry over it that I've said some things that I probably shouldn't have said that way. But the feelings are still there and they're true, and I hone in on those because those are my feelings. But the massive thing that I learned about myself and about others, especially warfighters who are coming home, is the amount of self-accountability that you have to have. You have to touch that dragon. You have to look inside and say, okay, this is who I was. This is who I am. And if I want to change it, I have to do it. There's no pill that's going to change it. The VA really isn't going to change you. You have to be willing to do it. And on the other side of that coin is, if you're willing to do it, there has to be an amount of physicality every day in your life. If you work a construction job and you're working hard every day and you're sweating and you're putting in sweat equity for your work, that doesn't count. That it just doesn't count because you're focused on work. You have to do the same thing for yourself. There's 24 usable hours in a day, and you have to do that. You have to push yourself every day through something. Now I go to the gym now. I don't have to walk anymore. So I don't walk as much as I used to, but I still hike and I still get out into nature because there is nothing uniquely groundbreaking about the healing power of the outdoors, but you have to get out there and you have to experience it, and you have to push yourself through certain times where it is hard, where you look up that mountain, you're like, oh, I don't want to go up there. And you turn around. Well, don't turn around, go, continue to push yourself, because what you'll find is that along the way, your brain starts to meld with your body again. And those memories that you have held onto for so long and have unpacked them incorrectly, you start to really give yourself the opportunity to unpack them while producing a massive amount of endorphins that help realize that memory. Those memories will never go away, but you're pushing yourself hard again and unconsciously you're doing it. And so I'm a huge proponent of physical activity. I'm a huge proponent of the outdoors. Strap a pack onto your body, go hike something hard and get this amazing view and payoff at the end of it. And your brain will do the rest. And that's kind of the neat part of that whole thing that I learned, is that your brain wants to figure it out, but you put yourself in so many self-cycling positions of alcohol or girls or drugs or whatever it is. Your brain's not doing anything for you at that point. And so to get outside and to really put miles under your feet, that is what helped me. I mean, there are guys out there that swam the entirety of the Mississippi River and it helped them. There are guys out there that have hiked across the country and it's helped them. There are guys that do bike rides and they continue to do this stuff because they know the healing power that physicality brings to trauma. And I think that's where it sits for me. And so, my girlfriend and I started a nonprofit called Bastards Road Project, and we take veterans on long distance hikes. And so we started this past year, but of course, COVID kind of screwed everything up. And so we haven't been able to hike these guys yet. We've had a couple test hikes and done some things, but the endeavor is to hike these guys from South Rim to North Rim and then back to the South Rim of the Grand Canyon in 4 days. And we kind of focus an idea of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and we let the brain do the rest. We force the function in the beginning to show them what it is, and then we just let the brain and the legs take over. And so suicide for me is hard to stomach because I've attempted it, and because I was at my lowest and I tried. And I failed as the stomach started wrenching and cramping from all the pills in my stomach. I realized I didn't want to do this. And, everybody says before they die, they have like flashes of things, maybe like family or friends. And I didn't really have that. What I really had was a letdown. And I felt that I was letting everyone down and that I was letting myself down. And I had something better to do. And so I drove to the hospital. And that's all she wrote. I was good. Stomach pumping, nodes and tubes and all that. And then you're done and you're good. And then you're in the psych ward for a bunch of days. And And that's really kind of how that happened. But suicide for me is it's not needed. It is not the way out. And I promise, if you take those memories to task and you put yourself back outdoors, it'll kind of fix itself. And it won't happen immediately. And it has to be a routine. It has to be over the course of time. But as you do it, things start changing, and they change for the better.
Well, yeah, one of your lines, I think, was the me that hurt me was the me that saved me, which I thought was a great way to sort of come full cycle on part of this journey and part of the process. And I think an important message as you're talking about there that other folks need to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, because it's how you utilize yourself for self-benefit. And if you just degrade yourself forever, then your body will degrade itself. Your body will take over and say, fine, this is what we're doing, and this is how we die. Or you can harness some of that energy that is bad and use it for good. And I think that's what this walk did for me.
Well, I wanted to pivot just a little bit, and I appreciate the seriousness that we got into here, but just to talk about some of the art in the film. So I can't pronounce the name of your colorist there, Brian, but I did notice like a really interesting tone over the entire film. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier, these sort of beauty shots and John walking on highways and walking on 2-lane roads and walking on paths. I mean, there's a lot of art in this as well. And I'm just curious about what was going through your mind, either in the editing room or as you're putting this together, and the kind of look and feel you wanted this to have.
Well, I did want the film to have a scale to it. As John was out there, the isolation of the road, I wanted to get a sense of that scale. I had never flown a drone before, never done any type of aerial photography or videography before. That was a trial, learning on the job, and it came with a few crashes. But that was a very important element to me. It was also using slow motion as a way to kind of freeze a moment in time on the road and kind of represent the work that John was doing on the road, as to look back and to reflecting back on the things that had happened. So the visual element of that, I guess it just comes from, my desire to capture that in a way that cinematic nature of psychological warfare on the road. And I had never done a documentary before. I came from a music video background and more short form type work. And so it kind of informed a lot of those decisions. It's like, how am I going to shoot this? How am I going to do that? And I knew there were going to be moments where I wanted to be mobile. I wanted to be a fly in the wall and have kind of a handheld camera type feel, so that I didn't have a big imprint on the room. But then I had some other, moments where John was out on the road. It's like, okay, instead of like following for a long time, maybe I just like pick my moments, so that you can really kind of see the beauty that is happening, and the beauty of this country, and of those kind of big sky roads out in Montana, Wyoming, and in the Midwest as well. And because that was John's therapy in a lot of ways, was on the road and doing that work day after day. So there was that contrast there. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, yeah, that's great. I noted the colors were muted in a lot of places, which I thought created a kind of interesting feel, like all the things that needed to be expressed weren't yet being expressed. And I just,
Sure.
I just appreciated that look, as well as the drone shots and those things.
Yeah. So, but your point to the color and referencing the colorist, Matt Rosieri at Digital Cave.
Yeah.
So Matt had developed this color palette where the greens were way subdued,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit like desaturated look with some darker tones. And I felt I was just immediately kind of struck by some of those first images on like, yes, this is, it's not as vibrant as maybe it could feel in those moments, but it felt appropriate. It felt balanced to where we needed to go. It was enough. It was, like I said, I think the greens were a big part of that, and lowering that down. I'm trying to find some insight into into how that kind of played in, but it was a feel thing, It's
Yeah,
a
no,
feel.
I mean, I think it, as a consumer, as a viewer, I think it worked. I mean, I just, that felt like, yeah, too vibrant wouldn't have set the mood as well as a more muted color palette
Yeah.
across.
And on a practical level too, there was a lot of multimedia in this film, as you saw between John's iPhone, the Red camera that we used, there's a Sony A7S II that was used for the handheld stuff. There was also media that we got from the different deployments and photos. So it felt like the best way to kind of meld everything together. I mean, it was a particular challenge to do that. So we needed a little bit of a louder impression from the color to kind of, I think, meld those together.
Yeah, so all the different footage you had. So like, yeah, the combat footage. I mean, some things that seemed that, John, I'm not sure if those were elements that were shot that you shot or that people shot while they
Oh
were
no,
on.
that was Oliver North from Oliver North shot that of us in Ramadi. So that's all Oliver North's footage that had been uploaded and able to be used.
Wow. I mean, it's fascinating to be able to have that, as a kind of time capsule, then to be able to weave into this,
Yeah,
story.
that was I thought what was interesting is that deployment in 2004. I mean, it was before you started seeing GoPros and video phones and all these type of things. So there wasn't the amount of content being there. And yeah, I mean, that kind of session with Oliver North and that kind of that special that he had done with John's battalion, it was a really fortunate to be able to access some of that footage to paint the picture of what those streets look like and what were some of those moments, what did it feel like.
Yeah. No, that's tremendous. Well, John, so the walking stick. So I think there's one shot, and maybe it's Taylor Wiley who's carving his name into it. Did everybody carve their name into the walking stick?
Yeah, I picked that up. They'd had a reunion in early November in Tennessee in Pigeon Forge, and so I walked to that. And so I met with those guys there. We were in Pigeon Forge, right next to Dollywood, and we'd rented a large house. I think it was like 4 floors. It was this massive cabin. It was amazing. And we all stayed there, and we went out to lunch one morning, or breakfast one morning, and walked by this, it was just kind of an outdoor store. And I saw all these walking sticks, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab a walking stick, and every person that I meet with is going to carve their name into it. And so, yeah, every person after Tennessee that I walked to, because then I still kept going all the way down to Miami. Every person that I walked to carved their name into that stick, and that I'm going to do something with it at some point. I'm going to put it into some sort of shadow box and kind of display it. But right now it's sitting behind my folks' door back home. They wanted to keep it for safekeeping, and so it's there, and it's a really neat. It's a really neat reminder of everyone. And so sometimes I look at those carvings and just get to remember exactly where I was or what was happening, what conversation was being had as those guys were carving their names into it.
It's fascinating, and that's a great sort of icon of the film. And then, you know, the boots, the shoes that is it Mikey Simons, is that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, yeah, like those also have like a tremendous symbolism. A, that you're walking. B, that you needed shoes. C, that, you know, the mom is saying this connects me to what you're
Right.
doing. Yeah, what
Yeah.
about
And
the shoes?
well, so I gave those back to Lorelei Simons
Yeah.
at the end of the walk, and Lorelei and I just immediately forged a friendship when I met her in Miller, South Dakota, and it was instant. And we talk all the time. She was just out in Wyoming with us at the beginning of this month for the Wyoming Film Festival, and so she was out there at the Q&As for that, and just experiencing part of the area that I had been through. And I got to show her where I crossed over the Bighorn Mountains on the Tongue River Canyon Trail. I got to sit there with her, and she got to see that in all of its just immediate splendor. Being able to take all of my Marines and my family up there and show them this just amazingly beautiful place, and to say, hey, this is where I walked, and this is where I walked up that mountain and over. And that was really neat. So Lorelei has displayed those shoes. They're in her house, and she sees them every morning, and she's just, you know, continually warmed by that. And she's been such a massive proponent of the self-betterment and really, you know, communicating your trauma so that other families don't have to lose their loved one to suicide. Because Mikey, you know, did a bunch of deployments, and when he came home, he just didn't win it. He didn't win that fight, and you know, drinking took its toll, and it was a tough time for that family. And they wondered how they could help, and they tried, and you know, it didn't work out. And for her to continue that fight for others now is amazing, and it's something that I'm honored to be in her presence for. She's a very, very strong woman who continues to be an advocate and to keep breathing life into Mikey's name, and to keep breathing life into the other names of those that we've lost to suicide afterwards. So it's been amazing. And yeah, there's quite a few different, you know, trinkets or tokens, if you will, that have been kind of given to people over the course of time. The massive Marine Corps flag that I walked with when I got done, I put that up in in one of the buildings over in the Marine Corps on the installation at Pendleton, and I had all the 2-4 Marines, the current 2-4 Marines, they signed it. And then a few years later, I had gone to something called the Halo for Freedom Warrior Foundation, which turned into the YO West Warrior Foundation out in Sheridan, Wyoming. And we had Pam Halal, who's a Gold Star mother of Derek Halal, who we lost on April 6th in Ramadi. And she had come out, and we'd jump out of helicopters or jump out of airplanes and shoot from helicopters and just do fun stuff. And so she had skydived that day, and I asked her to jump with that flag. And so she jumped with that flag and waved it and unfurled it as she was paragliding down or parachuting down. And then after that, I gave it to her. So that hangs in her house. So that, you know, I wanted to connect people to my journey for life. And I wanted them to know the impact that they had on me and to help keep that story alive of their boys and of us.
Well, that's tremendous. Yeah, because it struck me in some ways just watching you walk, you know, as Brian was shooting you walking, that it was almost a cape. Like it was a bit of a superhero kind of cape. And it was that was a cool, like I'm doing something really different. And the fact that these other symbols are with some other folks now, I think is very, very cool.
Yeah, Brian had written a post one time on Facebook. He was like, "Yeah, you see the red cape? It's not Superman, but he is a superhero or something." And I was like, "Yeah, all right, right on. I'm cool. I got a cape."
That's good. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone in thinking that.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, because I'm curious to know like what's next for both of you. But I think the closing scene there, what was it, out in Arizona, and there's sort of a like it's I don't know if you're in a cave looking out or exactly what the architecture is, but it feels like that draws some nice closure. But I guess it would be great to hear a bit from both of you of how that articulates closure in this documentary.
Well, I had Brian and Mark and another guy that's associated with film, Aaron. They had come out to visit, and they wanted to kind of, okay, John, let's cap off this thing and let's talk about you going back to school, which I graduated from. I graduated from Thunderbird December 17th of 2019, so this past year, which is nice. So I finished that chapter in my life. Old me didn't get the best of me, and I finished the thing that I set out to do. But I had been, and that's up in Sedona. It's a place called Robber's Roost. And I had been there a few months prior to that with a couple buddies and actually camped in that cave and looked out over this just amazing area. And so when I showed that to them, Aaron and Mark and Brian really just kind of sat down. They were like, this is it. That's what it is. It's coming out of the darkness into this world. And I see it that way. I think a lot of people, I think it's translated well. And I think a lot of people see it that way. It's the pushing through darkness. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to fight for it. And that's really kind of how I see it. And when the final shot was done and they showed it to me, I was like, I don't think you do better than that, man. I think that's it.
That's great. Yeah, Brian, what's your, as you were working to craft that, like what kinds of things are going through your mind visually?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was very appropriate to have John continue walking, because the journey never ends, right? I mean, it's a forever healing process. And I thought that, as John was kind of talking about some of the places that he had gone to since he'd been back at school, that he showed some pictures of that cave. And yeah, I mean, the cave kind of, as John described it, it really is a great kind of symbol for what we're all kind of like left with. Anybody that suffers from trauma, it's, yeah, you're surrounded by that darkness. It's forever there waiting, but it's what's forward. It's keeping momentum and moving forward despite of it. Not, you're never going to be rid of it, but it's always there, and that's okay. So yeah, that was something that I really thought was important to really hit at the end. And I think that we did some variations of what the last shot could be. I had my drone out, and I think we saw a shot from outside of the cave looking out that didn't really feel as right, although like it had this really, really great look. It's just such a beautiful part of the country. But yeah, it felt the appropriate the way we left it at. And I think for the film geeks out there, it was on just a motion control rig that I would just hike with. It's not the lightest thing in the world, but John was, at the front of the cave. I just moved back as far as I could. And yeah, it was like just the right amount of depth in that cave to get where we wanted to go. I used every inch of the back of that cave to get that shot, but I'm just really pleased that we were able to get it.
Nice. Well, yeah. So just what's next? John, you talked a bit about a foundation that you and your girlfriend have created.
Right. And it was after the fundraising round that we did through friends and family back in Baltimore at Jimmy's Seafood. And we were raising funds for this film. And I was just I was lost, I guess, after that. And I was like, well, what am I doing now? It's like, great, we've got this film or whatever, but what am I doing now? And Tiffany, my girlfriend, was like, you talk all this stuff about wanting to help veterans, and you know how to do it because you did it for yourself. So why not do that? And it just light bulb. And I was like, that's what we'll do. We'll take veterans hiking. And so that was a long process to build a nonprofit, and learning how to do that. And learning the intricacies of the IRS was no easy task. But we are now a fully accepted and functional 501c3. It's called Bastards Road Project, and our goal is to take veterans out and hike them long distances. So our taglines: hike long distances, figure shit out, and that's really what it is. And there's no flowery anything about it. It's as bare bones as you can get. Go hike, camp, see something absolutely beautiful, and work on yourself. So that's kind of what we're doing now. I've been employed now since I guess July. So I got a good big boy job. So it's kind of weird how to balance that plus trying to get veterans to hike. And so now I'm dealing with all the real world stuff again. I'm not in my own little, chasm of awesomeness where all I got to do is walk. Now I actually have to maintain relationships and build upon, the work that you're doing, and then build this nonprofit. And luckily I have an amazing team of people with me on this nonprofit, all of which, except for my girlfriend, are Marines. So it's veteran owned, and it's majority veteran operated. And it's probably one of the neatest things that I'm looking forward to seeing go bigger. We want to eventually get veterans out onto, the PCT in the Northwest. We want to get them into Cloud Peak and the Bighorns in Wyoming, and we want to get them into Montana. And so we're trying to do that and build this bigger thing, because I understand, and so many others understand, that, hiking is a great thing to do. And the isolation and the beauty of that all coupled together is amazing. So that's kind of where I am now. Just day by day, and just, every day, just kind of doing better than the day before. And if you don't kind of sit on it and ruminate on a failure, you just continue to move forward and continue to get things done. So that's where we are now. And I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, what about you? What's next for you?
Well, we have a few more film festivals that we're going to do, and then we're looking forward to Bastards Road finding a home and putting it open and available for the world. So that's our primary focus right now. But yeah, looking forward to having hopefully an opportunity to do a documentary film again. And it was an amazing experience, and I really obviously fell in love with the process of doing this, and it would be a blessing to be able to have the opportunity to do it again. So we're working on ideas on what to do, and hopefully build upon the good work. But I think still the primary focus right now, finding this a home, and really just have this conversation that the film kind of brings up, and have it kind of enter our culture in a bigger way. As much as we can contribute to people learning and figuring out what the struggles and challenges of our veterans coming home, there are fewer percentage of people that actually fight than ever right now. And we need to do a better job of figuring out how to help and how to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a tremendous amount of work ahead, and a great purpose. Well, before we wrap up completely, I did want to share something from our local paper here. So
look at that.
Yeah.
So the Wichita Eagle is our local paper, and the Go section, there's always promotion about the film festival, and just wanted you guys to know that, like, you made the cover, and
that's awesome.
Yeah,
well, that's really damn neat.
Yeah, it'll be a couple days into the festival when people actually see this, but I'm assuming they're going to connect the dots and go, oh yeah, that's what was on the cover of the paper. So,
well, that's
great.
Well, again, thanks to you both. Just really appreciate your time with this, and it's a tremendous film, and I'm really hoping too that it gets the distribution that it needs, so the rest of the world can see this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Thane. Thank you for having us, and thanks for allowing me to kind of bump my gums here for a little while and continue to talk about this. It's been an honor to be in all these different film festivals and to see the civilian populace really connect with the veteran world. And, you know, I had one woman one time, and this has always really resonated with me. And he was a Vietnam vet, and he had ended up taking his own life. And she had watched this film, and she came up to me at the end of the film and she said, you know, I thank you for doing this film, because now I have to go back and really, I have to understand and forgive my father. And that just blew my mind, man. Just to see that the civilian world is connecting with this and giving us so much credit for doing it, but then desiring to understand more. I think that's how we build this bridge and create that all-encompassing American community again.
I couldn't agree more. That's tremendous. That's tremendous.
Well, thank you, Thane, for your time, and for everybody that tuned in. Thank you so much for hearing us out, and for hopefully share the film around.
I know this crowd will talk it up, because that's what Tallgrass people do, is they talk films up.
Yeah, wish we could be there in person this year. Yeah,
we all wish we could be in person.
Yeah.
And the next documentary, that comes up, maybe we'll
Yes.
be together in person then when that happens.
Till that day. Yep.